Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. But before you drift off, consider liking this video, commenting where you're watching from and at what time, and subscribing to keep these chilling stories coming. Now, let's dive into these unsettling tales. My name's Samantha. I'm a high school senior, and I live in a quiet part of Northern California. The kind of town where nothing ever really happens, or so I thought. Last weekend, I agreed to watch my neighbor's dog while they went on a weekend trip to Lake Tahoe. It's not like I needed the extra money, but I've known them my whole life, and I like their dog, Riley, a huge, fluffy golden retriever who's honestly more friendly than protective. They live just a few houses down, tucked at the end of a cul-de-sac. Their house is surrounded by these tall pine trees that kind of muffle all the sound around you. It's peaceful, or at least it used to feel that way. They left Friday morning and I had the house to myself starting that afternoon. Riley was excited to see me and kept trying to bring me toys. I fed him, walked him a bit, and spent most of the evening lying on their couch watching a movie. Everything was fine, peaceful, even. Saturday was a little colder, and clouds hung low over the neighborhood. You could hear the wind sweeping through the trees like it was brushing the tops. It made the whole place feel even more isolated than usual. Still, I wasn't freaked out or anything. I had my phone, Riley, and Netflix. The neighbors had left me snacks and a spare key, and the house had cameras. A Ring doorbell in the front, and another camera covering the backyard. I didn't think I had anything to worry about. After dinner, I decided to shower and get comfortable before binging a few more episodes of this show I just started. I locked the front and back doors out of habit, turned on some music on my phone, and headed upstairs to the guest bathroom. Riley followed me halfway up before lying down at the top of the stairs like he always does when someone's home. I don't know how long I was in the shower. The room got foggy fast, and I remember zoning out, just enjoying the hot water. I had my music playing pretty low, low enough that I could still hear stuff going on outside the bathroom, just in case. At some point, I thought I heard something, like a knocking sound. But it was faint. It was one of those moments where you're not sure if you actually heard something or if it was just the pipes or the music. I turned off the water and stood there, not moving, just listening. At first, nothing. Silence. The kind that makes your ears ring a little. I waited maybe a minute, towel wrapped around me, heart beating a little faster now. Then, nothing. No more knocking, no footsteps, just quiet. I felt kind of dumb. I mean, it was probably just something outside. A branch falling, maybe, or Riley bumping into something. Still, I got out of the bathroom, towel still wrapped around me, and checked my phone on the sink. That's when I saw it, a few notifications from the Ring app. I didn't get those on Friday, so right away I knew something was off. There were 3 motion alerts, all from about 5 minutes earlier. I opened the app and clicked the first clip. The footage showed the front porch, and there he was. A man, probably late 30s or early 40s, standing right at the door. He was wearing a dark hoodie with the hood up, jeans, and white sneakers. He wasn't ringing the bell. He wasn't knocking. He was just standing there. Then he started pacing slowly. Not like he was confused, more like he was waiting, watching. His hands were in his pockets. He kept glancing back at the street, then back to the door. My stomach dropped. The second clip started. He was now trying the door handle, first gently, then a little harder. It didn't open, obviously. I'd locked it. He stepped back, looked around again, then disappeared from the frame. By now my hands were shaking. I clicked to view the live feed, but he wasn't on the front porch anymore. I quickly opened the backyard camera, and there he was again, walking along the side of the house slowly, testing each window. I couldn't move. I was still in just a towel. My clothes were in the guest bedroom down the hall, and I didn't want to make a sound. The only thing between me and this guy was the locked bathroom door and Riley, who, thank God, finally started barking like crazy downstairs. Deep, angry barks that echoed up through the house. But the guy didn't run. He didn't look scared. If anything, he looked annoyed, like the dog was an inconvenience. That scared me more than anything. I didn't want to speak out loud in case he could hear me, so I opened my messages and texted 911. I didn't even know you could do that until I looked it up in a panic. I wrote, "There's a man trying to break into my neighbor's house. I'm dog sitting. I'm upstairs in the bathroom. The address is, he's in the backyard now." No reply. I waited. My heart was hammering. The bathroom suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in on me. I kept checking the camera. He was still there, trying the kitchen window now. He paused, looked around, then walked out of frame. I didn't know where he went. Riley was still barking. Then I finally got a text back from 911. "We have officers en route. Stay quiet and stay where you are. Do not confront the suspect." Minutes passed. Or maybe it was seconds. It felt like forever. I kept switching between the camera feeds, hoping I'd see the red and blue flashing lights soon. I thought I heard a noise downstairs, like the back door handle being jiggled, and I honestly thought I was going to pass out. And then, the lights. Finally. Flashing lights swept across the window. I heard a loud voice yelling something, then Riley barking even louder, and what sounded like a loud thud, like someone jumping off something or getting tackled. I didn't come out until I heard the police knock and yell, "Sheriff's Department." They had him in cuffs outside by the time I came down. He didn't say a word, just kept his head down. One of the officers told me he'd been trying to pry open the kitchen window with a screwdriver when they got there. Turns out he was a wanted fugitive from a town about 40 minutes away. He'd been targeting houses that looked like they only had young women or teenage girls home alone. Sometimes he'd wait until he saw lights go off. Sometimes he'd break in while people were still awake. One of the officers told me I was lucky, that Riley barking probably bought me just enough time. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. The neighbors came back Sunday evening and were beyond grateful, but I could tell they felt guilty too. They kept saying, "We never imagined," over and over. I still live on that street. I still see that house when I walk to school or go jogging, but I'll never dog sit again. Every time I hear a knock or see a motion alert on my phone, I feel that same spike of fear, that crawling panic in my chest. I thought our neighborhood was safe. It doesn't feel like that anymore. I'm 31. I work freelance as a digital designer, mostly UX UI stuff. I had this big project due for a company based out of New York, and it was one of those deadlines where they needed everything perfect, fast. I knew I wouldn't be able to focus if I stayed in LA too long. Too many distractions, and I get overwhelmed easily. A friend suggested I get away somewhere quiet. No people, no traffic, no noise. Just me and my laptop. I found this cabin on a site that's kind of like Airbnb, but it's more for off-grid rentals. This one was located up in the California hills, somewhere about an hour and a half outside of Redding. Secluded, surrounded by trees and dirt roads. The pictures made it look peaceful, almost cozy. Big wooden porch, fireplace, fast Wi-Fi, and no one around for miles. It was perfect. I booked it for 10 days, packed up my gear and some clothes, and headed out. I stopped in a small town about 20 minutes from the cabin to pick up groceries. There's a little general store that stocks the basics. Not a big place, more of a shack, really. But the woman there was friendly, and I didn't think too much about it. When I got to the cabin, it was even quieter than I expected. No cell reception unless I drove a little ways back down the hill. The Wi-Fi worked though, and that's all I really needed. First few nights were honestly kind of peaceful. I worked during the day, made dinner, maybe watched some Netflix on my laptop, then went to bed. There was no traffic noise, no neighbors' TVs or dogs, just wind through the trees and sometimes distant howls from coyotes or something. But it never bothered me. I felt safe, weirdly. That changed on the fourth night. It was cold that evening, not snowing or anything, but the kind of cold that makes your fingers stiff when you type too long. I was wearing 2 pairs of socks and had a blanket wrapped around me while I worked on some design mock-ups. It was late, around 11 p.m. I remember because I was watching the time on my screen, knowing I needed to stop soon. The only lights on were in the living room, where I was working, and a small lamp in the kitchen behind me. I was in the zone, completely focused, when I heard a faint sound, like a knock. Not loud, just a couple of soft taps. It came from the front of the cabin. I froze for a second. There's a big window facing the porch, with a curtain over it. I hadn't shut it fully, but the angle made it hard to see anything unless you were right up against the glass. I just sat there listening, waiting to hear it again. Nothing. I got up slowly and peeked through the curtain. The motion sensor lights on the porch hadn't turned on, and I didn't see anyone. The wind was blowing a little. I figured maybe a branch had hit the railing or something. I tried to convince myself that's all it was. Still, I locked the front door. Then I went around and made sure the back door was locked too. I even checked the windows. Everything was shut tight. I went back to work, but I couldn't concentrate. About 15 minutes later, it happened again. Only this time, the knocking was louder, more deliberate, like someone was using the side of their fist. 3 heavy knocks, then silence. My stomach dropped. I turned off my laptop light and crouched down under the table. I don't know why I did that. Just instinct, I guess. I didn't want whoever was out there to know I was inside. My heart was beating so fast I could barely breathe. I waited, staring at the front door, barely blinking. Then I heard it again. Not knocking this time. Scratching. Slow, dragging scratches along the wood near the doorknob, like someone was tracing their nails or something along the frame. It wasn't frantic. It was playful, like they were toying with me. I covered my mouth with my hand to keep from making a sound. The scratching went on for a long time. It would stop, then start again. Then I heard the faint creak of wood, the porch floorboards. Someone was walking up there. I crawled slowly toward the back window, the one that faced the woods. It was freezing. I was shaking so hard I thought I might pass out. I moved the curtain just a little with my fingers, and I saw him. There was a man on the porch, standing by the front door. He was wearing dark clothes, looked like a hoodie and jeans, and holding something in his right hand. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but when he shifted under the porch light, it gleamed. A crowbar. That's what it was. He just stood there for a second, looking at the door. Then, without warning, he walked down the steps and disappeared into the trees. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor in the living room for hours, my camping knife in one hand and my phone in the other, even though I knew I had no reception. I thought about driving away, but I was scared to go outside. What if he was waiting? What if he hadn't actually left? Eventually, around 3 or 4 a.m., I moved into the bedroom and barricaded the door with a chair. I laid in the closet with a blanket over me, clutching that knife like my life depended on it. I must have dozed off at some point. When I opened my eyes again, it was barely light outside. I stayed quiet for a long time, listening. No sounds, no footsteps. I slowly got up and walked to the kitchen, then to the front door. There were deep scrape marks across the door frame, like someone had been jamming the crowbar into it, trying to get in. That's when I realized something terrifying. There were marks on the back door too, which meant he hadn't just waited out front. He had circled the entire cabin. He had tried the back too, which also meant he might have known there was no way for me to call for help up there. I drove straight into town, almost wrecking my car from speeding. When I got to the general store, the same woman from before called the sheriff for me. They came out and took my statement. They found footprints and the marks and a few cigarette butts near the edge of the porch. But that was it. No fingerprints, no cameras out there, no witnesses. He was gone. I haven't stayed in a remote location since. I can't even sleep without a sound machine and pepper spray next to my bed. I don't know what that guy wanted or how long he'd been watching me before he knocked. But I do know this. If I had opened the door, I don't think I'd be here writing this right now. I'm 19 now, but this happened when I was 12, back in 2018. I live in a pretty average neighborhood in suburban California, the kind of place where the houses all look similar, the streets are lined with palm trees and trimmed hedges, and nothing really bad ever happens. At least, that's what I thought. It was a quiet Thursday evening in early fall. I remember it clearly because my mom had just started this new routine where she'd go grocery shopping late to avoid the crowds. I usually hated being home alone, but she'd always be gone for just an hour or two. Our street was usually peaceful by that time anyway. The sun had already dipped below the hills, and everything outside was covered in that kind of pale blue light that happens right after sunset. I was in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the carpet in front of the TV, playing Minecraft on the Xbox. The house smelled like laundry and cinnamon candles. My mom had just done the sheets. The windows were cracked a little for air, and I could hear the faint chirping of crickets and the occasional dog barking a few houses down. It was calm. Too calm, I guess. I had just built this huge underground base in my Minecraft world, and I was focused, placing torches and digging a new tunnel, when I heard it. A knock. Not loud. Not urgent, just a single soft knock. I paused the game. My first thought was that it was the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I muted the TV and got up slowly, tiptoeing toward the door. We have one of those peepholes you have to stand on your toes to see through if you're short, and I remember stretching up to look through it. No one. The porch was empty. I stood there for a second, listening. There were no footsteps, no voice calling out. I even peeked through the window beside the door just in case. Still no one. I figured maybe it was a package being dropped off or something. I went back to the couch and unmuted the game, trying to shake off the weird feeling. But I didn't get 5 minutes back into my game before I heard it again. Another knock. But this time, it came from the back. I sat there, not even moving, just listening. It was subtle, like someone tapping gently but deliberately on glass. I slowly turned my head toward the kitchen, where the back sliding door was. I didn't want to go look, but I also didn't want to just sit there pretending it wasn't happening. After maybe 30 seconds of just listening, I got up again, quieter this time, and tiptoed across the tile floor toward the back door. I remember the cold of the tiles under my socks. I crouched down and peeked through the edge of the blinds. There was a man standing on our patio. I froze. My first reaction was that it must be someone my mom knew. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe she sent someone to check in. But no, I didn't recognize him at all. He looked like he was in his 40s, maybe older. He had messy dark hair and a patchy beard, and he was wearing this torn-up hoodie and jeans that were way too baggy. He wasn't knocking anymore. He was just standing there, tapping the glass with his fingers in this weird, slow rhythm. Almost like he was bored. I didn't know what to do. I ducked down below the counter and just sat there, breathing hard. My phone was still in the living room, charging. For some reason, I didn't want to move. And then I heard the crunching of gravel. I realized he was walking. Around the house, he was circling it. We had these little gravel paths along both sides of the house, and I could hear him walking slowly, his boots dragging across the stones. Then came tapping. At the windows, one, then another, then another. I think that's when I started to panic. I crawled on my hands and knees across the floor, back to the living room where my phone was. I didn't even stand up, just crawled like some animal trying to stay low. I grabbed the phone and lay flat behind the couch, breathing like I just run a mile. I could hear him outside, tapping again, not knocking, just tapping, window to window. At one point, I heard the sound stop and then footsteps again, moving faster this time. I don't know what made me do it, but I got up enough courage to peek out the corner of the blinds in the dining room. That window looks out toward the side yard. He was crouching, right by the window, peering inside, and he was smiling. It wasn't a normal smile. It was small, barely there, like he was enjoying himself quietly, like he knew I was somewhere inside watching him. I ducked down fast, heart hammering so hard it felt like it was in my ears. I finally called my mom. I didn't want to sound like a baby, but I was whispering so hard and trying not to cry. I told her someone was outside, going around the house, tapping on the windows, and I was scared. She told me to get into the bathroom, lock the door, and call 911 immediately. So that's what I did. I ran down the hallway, slammed the bathroom door shut, and locked it. I crouched down in the tub and dialed 911. My voice cracked when I spoke to the operator, but they told me to stay on the line and stay quiet. From inside the bathroom, everything sounded muffled, but I could still hear footsteps. And at one point, humming. He was humming, some kind of soft tune, like a lullaby almost. It drifted in through the small bathroom window up top, and then the doorknob rattled. Not the bathroom door, the back door. He was trying to get in. I stayed in the tub, holding my breath, just listening to the operator talk to me and trying to stay calm. The sirens couldn't come fast enough. It felt like forever, but it was probably only 10 minutes. When I finally heard the sirens getting louder, everything stopped. No more footsteps, no more tapping, no more humming, just silence. The police came and knocked, and I finally left the bathroom. They checked the yard, said they saw footprints, lots of them, all around the house. And the kitchen window, it had been pried open just a little, like someone had started to work at it but didn't have time to finish. They never caught him. I never saw him again, but for weeks I kept thinking I'd see his face in the windows at night. Even now, I hate being home alone after dark. And sometimes, even now, I swear I still hear that humming. I'm a junior at a college in Southern California, majoring in English. I've always liked to read and write, but I'm not really good at writing, so don't expect anything fancy here. I'm just trying to explain what happened the best way I can. This happened last winter, right before Christmas. I still think about it all the time. It started when my literature professor asked if I could house sit for him. He was going to be away for about 2 weeks visiting his family up in Oregon. He knew I wasn't flying back home until Christmas Eve, and since I'd done a few small tasks for him during the semester, like helping him organize his bookshelf and proofreading some old essays, he trusted me, I guess. His house was in this really quiet, gated neighborhood about 15 minutes away from campus. It wasn't one of those huge, fancy mansions, but it was definitely nicer than any place I'd ever lived in. One story, modern style, big glass doors in the back that opened to a small patio. The backyard had a tall wooden fence all around it and was bordered by a bunch of trees. The neighborhood itself felt almost too quiet. No kids outside, barely saw anyone walking their dogs, and the houses were kind of far apart. Still, I was excited. It felt like I was getting a free vacation away from my cramped dorm. The first 2 nights were honestly great. I'd make a simple dinner, usually pasta or microwave meals, sit out on the patio with a hoodie on and just read or scroll through my phone. The weather was chilly, but not freezing. On the second night, I fell asleep on the couch while watching some documentary. I woke up around 3 a.m. and made my way to the guest bedroom, brushing my teeth quickly before crashing again. It was the third night when things started to feel off. I remember I had just finished showering and was brushing my teeth in the guest bathroom. It was around 11:10 p.m. I remember because I checked my phone afterward. While I was brushing, the doorbell rang. I paused, toothbrush still in my mouth. I froze. It wasn't super loud, but in a dead silent house, it sounded like a hammer on metal. I stood there for a few seconds, listening. No follow-up knock, no voices, just quiet. I spit out the toothpaste, rinsed my mouth, and walked out to the hallway, drying my hands on my pajama pants. The living room was dark, except for the glow from the TV I had left on. Some cooking show was still playing. The front door had a little monitor nearby that displayed footage from a security camera mounted right above the porch. When I looked, there was no one there. Just the empty doorstep, the porch light casting long shadows, and the professor's weird metal wind chimes moving slowly in the breeze. I stood there for maybe a full minute, staring at the screen. I tapped it to rewind the footage maybe 10 minutes back. Still nothing. I figured it was probably a package, though it was weird that someone would deliver something that late. Amazon drivers sometimes leave stuff without ringing, but I told myself maybe this one decided to press the bell. Still, something didn't feel right. I just chalked it up to nerves and went back to my room. That night, I didn't sleep that well. I kept hearing creaks and thuds, but the professor had already warned me the house made weird noises when the temperature dropped. Old pipes and settling wood, he had said. The next night, around 10:45 p.m., the doorbell rang again. This time, I was on the couch, half asleep. I jolted upright, my heart already beating fast. I quickly muted the TV and sat there in the silence. Then I heard something else, a voice. It was extremely faint, like someone whispering through the door. At first, I thought I imagined it. I held my breath and listened. Then I heard it again. A man's voice, whispering my name. I felt my skin crawl. It was slow and quiet, but I could hear it clear as day. My name, spoken like they were unsure how loud to say it, like they were testing if I could hear them. I got up and went to the monitor again. This time, there was someone on the screen. A tall guy, thin build, wearing a black hoodie. The hood was up and he was leaning in close to the camera, his face mostly hidden in shadow. He was whispering again. I couldn't make out the words this time, but his mouth was moving. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at the screen. He stayed like that for almost a full minute before stepping back slowly and walking out of frame. I backed away from the monitor and went to every single window and door in the house, double checking that they were locked. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely slide the bolts in. Every window, every door, even the back patio, locked. I turned off all the lights and grabbed a metal rod I had seen in the closet earlier that day. I think it was part of a curtain rod or maybe something from the garage. I stayed in the professor's study with the door closed and the lights off. The room had only one window, and I made sure the blinds were tightly shut. I didn't have a weapon, really, just the rod, and I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just some drunk guy who got the wrong house, but my gut told me otherwise. After sitting there in silence for about 10 minutes, I remembered I could rewind the security footage even further. I pulled it up on my phone this time. What I saw made my stomach drop. The man had come to the door twice before, once at around 8:05 p.m. and again around 9:50 p.m. Both times, he didn't ring the bell. He just walked up, looked around, and left. The second time, he stayed longer and even pressed his face close to the camera, but I hadn't noticed. The third time, he finally rang the bell and whispered my name. He had been watching the house. At that point, I called the neighborhood security. The professor had left me the number in case anything went wrong. The guy on the phone was calm, but said he'd send someone over right away. I stayed in the study, still holding that stupid metal rod, just staring at the door like I expected it to swing open. Security came about 15 minutes later and rang the bell. When I confirmed who it was, I let him in. The officer was probably in his 40s, really calm and professional. He looked at the footage with me and said he'd seen this kind of thing before, usually people checking houses during the holidays to see which ones were empty. He said the guy might have assumed the house was unoccupied, and when he saw lights and someone inside, he might have gotten spooked and left. Still, he said he'd alert the other patrols to keep an eye on the house for the next couple nights. But that doesn't explain how he knew my name. The man never came back while I was there. When my professor returned, I told him everything. He was clearly disturbed by it, but thanked me for being alert. I don't think he expected me to take the situation that seriously. He let campus security know too, just to be safe. Even now, sometimes I wake up at night and think I hear someone whispering it again, just beyond the door. That's it for today's tale from Shivering Vault. If you have a story worth sharing, drop it in the comments or send it our way. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow thrill seekers. As always, the Shivering Vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, the vault awaits your return.